Hi, guys. This is Sam Cook, host of the Stick to the Script podcast. Today, we have none other than Mississippi Association of Community Colleges Conference Commissioner, Mr. Steve Martin, joining us. I am so excited to have him as he talks with us about his journey into collegiate athletics, from professional sports, and then into serving as a commissioner for not one, but two conferences. I'm excited to have him, and he's coming right up here on Stick to the Script. I'm Sam Cook, host of the Stick to the Script podcast, here with Mississippi Association of Community Colleges Conference Commissioner, Mr. Steve Martin. Mr. Martin, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Mr. Cook.
Thanks for joining us. For those of you that don't know, Commissioner Martin and I we have done what I call a couple of tours. So we've worked together. We worked together in another conference, and now we're working together again. And so I'm very excited to have this opportunity, and also just to have an opportunity, Commissioner Martin, Steve, if I may, if that's okay with you. Just to chat with you a little bit about your background, your history, and what you're doing now with the Mississippi Association of Community Colleges Conference. So why don't you go ahead and give a brief introduction of yourself?
Well, I have, I think, a very interesting background. I'm a New Orleanian, born and raised in New Orleans. Attended St. Augustine High School in New Orleans, played basketball. Was a fairly decent basketball player. I was able to go on to play basketball at Georgetown University. Played for Coach John Thompson, Hall of Fame coach, and had a pretty good career at Georgetown. While at Georgetown, I started for 2.5 years, completed my season, and left Georgetown with a degree in accounting. Also, as I came out and graduated from Georgetown, I was also drafted by the Washington Bullets, now the Washington Wizards. But I decided to pursue my career in accounting. So I worked a number of years in accounting, started off with Ernst & Young for a couple of years. Then I moved back to New Orleans as manager of accounting for the World's Fair. Some transition happened from there. I went from accounting to moving to New York, working for the NBA League office in a number of capacities. A lot of marketing, a lot of community relations, and also I did some international business development while at the NBA. So I stayed at the NBA for about 14 years. And then after that, I decided I wanted to move back to New Orleans. I took on a position at Dillard University as their athletic director, which, my time at Dillard, it was very fulfilling, and we did really good things at Dillard. And then from Dillard, the Charlotte Hornets moved to New Orleans, and I was offered a position with the Hornets as vice president by that owner, and the owner was George Shin. So I spent a number of years working for the Hornets, and like I say, about 14 years. And then after that, I moved on to work as commissioner of the Gulf Coast Athletic Conference. And then from the GCAC, I landed with the Mississippi Association of Community Colleges Conference. And I've been with the conference for a little over a year now.
Excellent. So talk to us a little bit about how kind of that foundational experience brought you to this point. Tell us about how you came to such an amazing opportunity working with the NBA. How'd that come about from an accounting background?
Well, that is one of the most interesting transitions that I've had in my career. When I moved back to New Orleans working for the World's Fair, one thing that I realized that we didn't have at that time was a summer basketball league for college players. While I lived in D.C. and went to school in D.C., we had a couple of really good summer basketball leagues, both for college players and for college players and NBA. So when I moved back to New Orleans, that was something that was missing. It didn't exist. So what I undertook was to establish, organize, you know, a summer basketball league in New Orleans. I got together with some of the college coaches, those coaches that I knew. I got together with a lot of folks that I also played with while, while I was in high school. And what we did is we put together a very good summer basketball league. Now, when I was doing that summer basketball league, it just sort of happened that a guy by the name of Cecil Watkins came to visit New Orleans. And at that time, Cecil was the supervisor of referees for the NBA. And what Cecil would do is he would go around the country to these summer leagues and he would observe potential referees that he thought would have a future, maybe officiating in the NBA. So Cecil came to New Orleans for whatever reason, saw our summer basketball league, liked what he saw from an organizational standpoint. And after he left New Orleans, about 3 weeks later, he called me and asked me if I would be interested in moving to New York to work for the NBA. At that time, the NBA had the had a group of summer leagues that were kind of loosely connected, and they used these summer leagues to help to train officials. And that was, that was the first step for those officials, kind of to get their foot into the NBA. So. So he came down. He was interested in me working for the NBA. I accepted the position, and that's what I did for about 2 years. I helped to
Wow.
manage all these summer leagues around the country. And at that time, they were mostly in NBA cities. And what was interesting about those summer leagues is you had a lot of NBA players that would come and play in those summer leagues. So it made it extremely competitive. So sometimes I would go to Chicago and you would see Isaiah Thomas playing in the summer league, or you would go down to Dallas and the guys like Mark Aguirre would be playing in the summer league. So the summer league tour during the summer was very interesting. I got to tell you, very competitive. Guys like Akeem Olajuwon, you would go and you would see guys like that playing. And at the same time, we had some officials that came out of the summer league that eventually made it to the NBA. So 2 years was spent with summer leagues, and then after that, I kind of expanded because the NBA was growing, and so that's how I made the transition.
Well, I think it's particularly interesting because you mentioned that for so many of us the NBA is this major multi-city, country organization, and to have started at the ground level, so to speak, is just an interesting thing to hear. So tell us just a little bit more about your transition to collegiate athletics from professional sports, and kind of the challenges endemic to that.
hmm Well, when you transition from professional athletics to college sports, especially when you're talking about small colleges like HBCUs. Obviously, it has to do with resources. But one thing that intrigued me about moving from the NBA, transitioning to Dillard, and the reason why I took the opportunity was I really saw it as an opportunity to provide some insight and some knowledge and experience that I've had to an HBCU. And that was very, very important to me. Now, I grew up in New Orleans, and growing up, I saw a lot of Xavier University basketball, a lot of Dillard, a lot of Suno. So those things were important to me. So when the opportunity with Dillard came up, I just thought it was a very valuable opportunity for me to give back and work for HBCU. But like I said, when you talk about the NBA, HBCUs, and the IAs, it starts off with resources. And obviously, the smaller schools do not have the resources of professional sports organizations. So you want to get creative for the most part. You had to get creative in recruiting. You had to get creative in your budgets and things of that nature. But it really gave me some valuable insight in terms of operating and managing athletic program at a HBCU.
I think it would be kind of the lazier question to say, what are the differences between the two? So I'm actually interested in knowing what are the commonalities between working for a professional sports league and working in collegiate athletics.
Well, I think you first start off with the athletes themselves. You know, even at the NAIA level, our student athletes were very competitive. Our coaches were competitive. There was an attitude of winning. There was an attitude of excellence. So you can draw those, you can draw those parallels for the most part. And as I worked for the NBA, because at that time the NBA was growing and expanding, I saw the same thing in terms of what we're trying to accomplish at Dillard University, the growth and the expansion, and how you look at opportunities to expand, how you look at opportunities to gain more exposure. The NBA in my last 2-3 years, the push was to go international. At Dillard University, the push may have been, let's get the region thing done for the most part. So those are things that are very common at all levels for the most part.
Now, you then transitioned into the role of commissioner of the Gulf Coast Athletic Conference. And I think in many ways, I would actually venture a guess that a lot of people don't actually know what the role of a commissioner is, or what a commissioner does on a given day. Give us a little bit of insight on what is a commissioner? What does a commissioner of a collegiate conference do?
Right. So the first thing I will say, the reason why I got interested in being a commissioner is because I worked for a commissioner in terms of David Stern, and I thought that was one of the most intriguing things that I had seen in my career at that time, to see, that individual who was responsible for the overall league. But when you look at, especially at the college level, what does a commissioner do? So first thing I would say, the commissioner answers to the presidents, okay? And in our conference right now, we have 15 schools. So we have a group of 15 presidents that I ultimately is responsible to. Also, a commissioner works very closely with the athletic directors. And it's trying to give the group of athletic directors some vision, some direction, and things like that. Because for the most part, the athletic directors make recommendations, and we have to, as commissioners, we have to try to, as best as we can, shape those recommendations, give them some vision, some directions, because we just don't want to have just these loose recommendations being made. And recommendations could be anything from based on rules, regulations, things like that. And then we take those recommendations and we push them to the presidents for the most part. But also from a business standpoint, again, the commissioner has to give the conference some vision. So vision in terms of marketing, vision in terms of live stream, vision in terms of our brand. So we work on those type of things on a daily basis. And then it's making sure all the rules, regulations, or all of our schools are abiding by all the rules and regulations. But commissioners should always put a big emphasis on business of the conference and the operations of the conference. And that's what I learned from David Stern, because, when I first started at the NBA, I think we had maybe 50 employees. When I left the NBA, we had about 600 employees, okay? Because he had a vision about expanding the NBA internationally. He had a vision about NBA TV. He had a vision about bringing on international corporate partners etc. So all I did was really borrow the things that he did and try to position them with the conferences that I worked with. But one of the biggest things was, you know, what your responsibilities as a commissioner. I mean, you're working with presidents, you're working with athletic directors. You hear a lot from coaches. You hear a lot from athletic trainers. So in these last 60 days, obviously because of the situation that we're in, I've had meetings, weekly meetings with athletic directors. I have had meetings with coaches, and all this is, done by Zoom. A week or so ago, I met with our athletic directors to help to develop some policies and procedures, health policies and procedures. So it's a lot of conversation, but big picture again is how do you manage the business of the conference? How do you give the conference some overall direction and some overall vision?
I think in so many ways it's an interesting dynamic because collegiate athletes, fans, and for those people that don't really work in don't really understand kind of the nuance of working in a conference. I think they think that the commissioner, whether it's Roger Goodell or whomever, that they're just they make decisions by fiat and what they say goes, and they don't understand that the league office is many people and it's many different influences and it's many different voices that ultimately a commissioner has got to come together, got to bring all of those voices together and kind of distill them into a single voice that's the voice for everyone.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. It is the role to build consensus because you can start with a issue, an item that has 15 different opinions, and you have to bring those opinions together and narrow them into, into one opinion for the most part. Um, but as commissioners, we don't make unilateral decisions. Again, we're working with athletic directors. We're working with presidents. Now, are there times when a commissioner, has to kind of push uh, to really get a decision done, or get something through on his own? Absolutely, absolutely, yes. I mean, we are in an environment right now that is fluid, and sometimes you can't wait to have the meetings with the presidents, the meetings with the athletic directors. So sometimes you do have to make some unilateral decisions for the most part. But I got to tell you, it is bringing a lot of people together. And like I said, we have 15 schools, 15 different presidents, 15 different athletic directors, and obviously with all the sports we engaged in, a lot of coaches. Now, and a lot of insight. What I try to do from a commissioner standpoint, I do communicate with our coaches through our committee chairs, and talk through the chairs a lot about what's going on in the individual sports, what their needs are, what the issues are, etc. And obviously have a lot of conversations with athletic directors because again, I have to have a good sense of what they're thinking in terms of, and to be able to mold it and shape it, hopefully into one thought in one direction.
Now, let's transition a little bit. You have been with the MAC with MACCC for a little over a year now. It's been a fairly busy year for you. You guys have gone through a rebrand. So you were previously the Mississippi Association of Community and Junior Colleges. You're now Mississippi Association of Community Colleges Conference. New website, new app, just a lot of things that have going on to modernize and to bring the conference into kind of into the common era. Talk about that. Why was that important for the conference? And really just at a stellar conference itself, multiple national champions, amazing programs, multiple athletes that have gone on to play at the professional level, and definitely to play at the 4 year at 4 year colleges. So why was it important to kind of give the conference a facelift, so to speak?
Well, it's kind of interesting. The rebrand or the concept of a rebrand to me was very easy. My first 30 days of taking on this role, I would go out, I would meet at the schools, visit campuses, visit coaches, athletic directors, presidents, etc. So when I would drive to our campuses, I would notice that our schools no longer carried in their name junior colleges. They're all community colleges, with the exception of Jones. Jones calls himself Jones College, but there was no junior college. And I was like, this is, very interesting. So none of our schools have junior college in their names. So why should we be known as a conference of junior colleges? Okay.
Hmm.
So that was a fairly easy one to connect those dots and say, hey, we need to think about what our brand is. Also, you mentioned our previous name was Mississippi Association of Community and Junior Colleges, but it doesn't speak to athletics. So when you look at that name, what is it? Is it an association of some kind? But it didn't speak to athletics. So thinking about a new name, connecting a name with what our colleges really stood for in their names, and also trying to connect with bringing the identity of an athletic conference, that was kind of the major concepts that brought the thoughts together. That it's take a little different direction. And I tell you, from my understanding, had only been over the last 3 or 4 years that our schools changed their names from community colleges to, I'm sorry, from junior colleges to community college. So we need to catch up with as you say, with the times, and and be more aligned with what our schools' names were, and also bring into focus an athletic conference for the most part. So that was the reason behind the brand. And obviously, when you start changing name, I just saw an opportunity. Let's develop a new logo. So our schools actually have a group of marketing directors, which we call our marketing committee. They came up with a number of different looks. We selected one. Presidents voted on the one that we will be using moving forward. So that took that took all of that took a long process. Now I started that process last May. Okay, and we're just getting to the point where we have a new name, a new logo, etc. Where we're ready to roll out almost a year later. So and I understood why it would take so long, because it was really ingrained in a lot of people's mind in Mississippi that MACJC, that was the junior colleges in
Hmm.
Mississippi. So changing that perception. And then, Sam, what we started to look at, the next over some, over several months, we really started to look at what our schools were doing to brand themselves. And what I found out, our schools do a great job with live streaming. Um, Last year, when you look at the number of impressions that our schools created through their live streaming, it was over 22 million impressions. Okay. So when you have those types of numbers, people are watching you.
Hmm.
So we just need to take a look at how do we enhance the product for the most part, and how do we rebrand, brand, and have some consistency with the product. So all those things came into play as to why we started to move in this direction.
Absolutely, and I think kind of to your point, you want to be able to tell the story. You want to be able to spotlight again some of the amazing things that your coaches, your athletes, even support staff are doing. And so I think that absolutely the rebrand was necessary. It was vital, and I think it's going to ultimately pay some dividends. Now let's kind of address kind of one of the largest in kind of the biggest issue that's going on in collegiate athletics right now, which is what does collegiate athletics look like in the era of COVID, and not necessarily what does the MAC look, but just kind of your thoughts on what's going on universally. You've had a number of conferences that have canceled sports. You've had some that are amending their schedules, but these are, they're difficult times for everyone. And so certainly
Mhm.
when you've got contact sports coming up, we're just a stone's throw away from football season. What are your thoughts about what a potential uh, athletic season could look like during these times?
Well, I tell you, as we have learned over the last couple of months, this thing, as conference leaders, as school leaders, we have to be flexible. We have to be mobile. We have to be able to adjust. And so we look at this situation on a week by week basis. So right now we're scheduled to start football games October 1. All of our sports we push back to the spring. Okay,
Consistent
and
with
we did
the
that before,
NJCAA.
right, in line with the NJCAA. So we took a little different approach with football in terms of still attempting to play in the fall, but that may change. Okay, so what we've said is we want to continue to look at the situation with COVID. One of the things that's important to to our football program is that we do provide a lot of four-year schools of talent for the most part, and most of that talent is seen obviously in the fall. Most of our kids sign by December and they graduate in December and they go off to the four-year school spring practices. So we want to take a look at, is that still a possibility? Now, that's going to be dictated obviously by COVID-19. That's going to be dictated by, you know, what the four-year schools do. That's going to be dictated by health and safety issues, all those. But what we wanted to say, let's take the time and see if some of those, if we'll get relief from COVID and if four-year schools are going to play. But let's take the time to evaluate that before we just automatically say we're going to play football in the spring. Now, ultimately, it may happen, okay, and we will have a backup plan if we do have to move to the spring. But I will tell you, as you look at athletics right now, with now moving so many sports to the spring. Look, last week we sat down and we put together the spring schedule for all sports. And I got to tell you, when you look at so many games being played over a 4-month period, when you try to when you try to make sure that you don't have too many games happening on anybody's campus at the same time,
Hmm.
I mean, those things that you have to really work through and work on for the most part. So, so COVID has really affected sports, and it's going to going to continue to affect sports over the next, 2-3 weeks, and then we'll see what really happens in the spring for the most part. Uh, we're all concerned about health and safety. We've been writing policy. We have had many calls and meetings with the Mississippi Department of Health to get some guidance, get some directions. So all those things are just ongoing conversations, and you know, the biggest issue that we try to look at is health and safety of our student athletes. And as we get closer to October, if we don't feel that we're comfortable with health and safety issues, then obviously we'll make another decision.
Spoken like a true commissioner. Commissioner Martin, thank you so much for joining us today, and best of luck to you and the entire MAC.
Okay, I appreciate it, Sam, and we'll be talking soon. And we got a lot of good things coming within the next week or so. So thank
Absolutely.
you.
Thank you.